Hey everybody. So today's date is Friday, August 9th, 2019, which means that it's been less than a week since the shootings in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio claimed the lives of 32 people and left more than 50 others injured. Now, whenever tragedies like this occur, there are always far-reaching ramifications. Some are social, some are political, and those don't even begin to touch the greatest cost, which is the impact on the families and the communities that will never be the same because they've lost loved ones. But in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual impact of tragedies like this, because whenever things like this happen, there are always questions that come up about the goodness and the power of God. If God is so powerful, and if He's so good and loving, then why would He allow things like this to happen? Now, let me be upfront with you. These are complex questions, and we're not going to be able to answer them perfectly in such a short time frame. But I want to just give you some food for thought in today's video. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer begins chapter 3 with these words: "There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven." And then he lists 14 contrasts that are part of the human experience. Everything from birth and death to weeping and laughter, love and hatred, and even killing and healing. Now, in a list like this, obviously some of these things are really enjoyable, and others are really terrible. But the one thing they all have in common is that all of them are inevitable. At some point, every one of us is going to be impacted by each of these things on some level. Now, later on in verse 11, the writer goes on and says that God has made everything appropriate in its time. Some versions say He's made everything beautiful in its time. But in a list of things that includes war and killing and hatred, how can those things be described as beautiful? It really leads us back to our original question. How can a loving, powerful God allow such terrible things to happen to His creation and then even call those things beautiful? You know, it's really important for us to remember that the world hasn't always been like this. The Bible teaches that in the beginning, God made everything good. And life wasn't messed up in the ways that it is now. But God also created us with the ability to choose. And because we chose to sin, all of these negative things like hatred and war and death began to creep into the world. And as much as we try to come up with ways to rid the planet of these things, they will always be a part of life in this world. That doesn't mean that things will always be this way. God's power is demonstrated in the fact that, just like in the beginning, He's created a place that's free from all these negative things. But unlike the beginning, this heavenly place is never going to be ruined or infected by sin. God's love is shown in the fact that He makes it possible for us, people who have chosen sin and been wrecked by our bad choices, to still have a place there. So that's why the writer of Ecclesiastes could say that everything is beautiful in its time. It's because every part, this inescapable cycle of good and bad, teaches us, number one, how little control we really have over things in this life. Number two, in the absence of this control, how vital it is for us to put our trust in a God who really does control things. And number three, it teaches us to want something better than the uncontrollable extremes that this life offers here. That's what the writer means in verse 11 when he says that God has also set eternity in their heart. It's the idea that He's created in all of us a God-shaped hole that can't be filled by anything else. It's an intrinsic longing for something better, more meaningful, and more permanent than anything this life on planet Earth can offer us. So when tragedies of any kind happen here, remember that doesn't mean that God is unloving or weak, or even that there is no God. But it's one of the ways that God teaches us that if we really want to find our happily ever after, we're not going to find it here. But we will find it in heaven with Him. May God comfort all of those who are suffering in El Paso, in Dayton, and beyond. And may God help us all set our affections on the true paradise that He's created for us beyond this life. See you next time.